not to let everybody in. And on today's session, before we kind of introduce our special guest, Grant and I, we're going to just have a little bit of fun at the start. So we're going to have a little bit of a warm up for you guys. But just to mention, we are launching what we call the Visual Jam Extra. So this is the regular Visual Jam meetup that we have. It's totally free in terms of today's session, and these meetups will continue to be free. But what we found was from the community, we were being asked about, could we run a deep dive on certain topics and run some more formal type of sessions. So we're going to experiment, and we're experimenting with a true legend. For the first one, it's the amazing Mike Rohde. So Mike's going to be running the first ever Visual Jam Extra. And those are paid events, but we're keeping the price point really low, or as low as we can. I think it's about £30 we're charging for that event. It'll be a 2-hour workshop where we're going to be getting Mike to play a live talk. He'll be pausing the talk and he'll be sketchnoting, and you'll be able to sketch along with him. So he'll be talking about his thought process and really getting inside his head is the idea of that. So that's on the 24th of April. So I just thought I'd give that a quick plug. If anyone is interested in that session, I've just put the link in the chat. It's on Eventbrite, and there's a 10% discount as well in there. But in terms of today's session, in the warm-up section, Grant's going to sort of take over now, and there is an opportunity for you guys to win a free ticket for that event, as well as some additional discounts as well, but we'll explain more in a moment. And on that note, I'm going to stop sharing and over to you, Grant.
Excellent, thanks, Paddy. Can you just, people still arriving, so can you take over admitting?
Yep.
Good lad. Right, let me share my screen. So we're gonna do some drawing, and we're gonna draw some Muppets. That's what we're gonna do for our warm-up, and then we're gonna do a little bit of a competition where you're gonna create your own Muppet characters. So we're gonna start off by drawing a couple of famous Muppets. I've got a list of 8 in front of me that I've practiced and I can have a go at. So does anybody want to shout out a Muppet? I'll see if they're on the list.
Beaker.
Beaker, excellent, he's on there, good stuff. Beaker, so everybody got their pens? Beaker, we start with a big circle for his nose. It's Beaker's nose. And if you imagine you're kind of drawing kind of Mickey Mouse ears on top of that nose, either side, but quite close together, like that. And then we do some dots in the middle. And then Beaker's mouth kind of starts and goes behind his mouth. So if you draw a little shape like that, and then you do the same at the other side, you just colour that in there, and you've got the basics of Beaker there. So then we've got to draw Beaker's kind of head. He's got a long, thin head, and it kind of starts just at the edge of his eyes here, something like that. And then we do a line at the bottom. And then with his hair, I think it's just got to go for it. He's kind of got just this crazy mop of hair going on. That's Beaker. And then he's the scientist's assistant, isn't he? So he's always kind of got his shirt and tie going on, and he's got his lab coat. So you kind of just draw that underneath, and then his body's kind of quite thin. And that is how you draw something that's a bit like Beaker, but with a slightly too big nose. There we go. Okay, does somebody want to go for another one? I'll see if they're on my list. Shall we got there while we're waiting? Should we do Kermit?
Kermit.
Kermit's easier. Sort of. He's easy in a sense. So with Kermit, I guess what you're going to bear in mind, I'll do this at the sides just so you know. If you think of the shape of Kermit's head, if you draw kind of a cross like that, the key is to try and aim for that kind of, that sort of shape when you're drawing it. So bear that in mind. I start with thinking like the eyes are going to be placed somewhere like that. So to draw a clean version, you do a semicircle and then kind of close it off like that. And then you want to try and repeat as evenly as you can on the other side. And then for Kermit's eyes, he's got these eyes where you do these curves like this, and then you do like a circle in the middle. That's Kermit's eyes. And then from there, imagine we're trying to draw this shape. Just do the curved line up here. And then this is the trickiest bit. It's just trying to follow that shape and the proportions. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's good enough, a bit wonky. And then he's got a big old smile. It kind of hits the widest part of his mouth, like that. And then we just need to kind of come in and out a bit, try and get it close to the bottom here. Sorry, my angle's a bit funny here that I'm drawing from, like that. And then Kermit's tongue comes down from the top. And then to finish Kermit off, we have to give him this kind of, I don't even know what you call this, but he has that going on. And if I just grab this, go for a bit of black here, and do that quickly. And you have Kermit the Frog. Now, if you want to do a variation of Kermit the Frog, my favourite character, Constantine, and you can do that, and he turns into Constantine. Although Constantine, when they do him, I think he's kind of got a bit more pointy features, but yeah, there you go. It's Kermit. Anybody want to shout out another one?
The chef.
Oh, I haven't got the chef. Shall I tell you who I've got? I've got Fozzie Bear.
Cookie Monster.
Oh, I've only got Muppet Show characters. I don't do
Animal.
Animal. Yeah, Animal. So Animal's quite tricky, but let's go for it. So Animal has a nose that's kind of this teardrop shape, something like that. And then his eyes are a slightly different shape. They go like this, to either side. So that's kind of like how you start Animal. And then he's kind of got black hair around his eyes. So I think the easiest way is just to kind of fill that bit in around. So you've got the basic. It's kind of got this going on, and then it's kind of got these hairs coming off. So you've got the start of Animal's face there. And then if you imagine just kind of coming out from underneath his nose, you want to draw a big kind of crazy moustache. Something like that. And then Animal's just got a really big, wide mouth. So just go big and go bold and do this kind of thing. And then some teeth. And then Animal's tongue is different to the others. It's kind of this thing going on. And then to do the rest of him, I think if we just add a couple of cheeks to give him a bit of kind of stretch to his face, and then you just got to start thinking, right, where's his hair go? So it's kind of, it's a bit wild and crazy. He's got a beard going on here. And just, I don't know, just go for it, freestyle it a bit. And that's kind of how you do Animal. And again, to get the right effect, can we just fill in the colour here? Just take longer than I thought, because he's got a big old mouth. You get the idea. And then once you've got that, you can kind of do a shadow going on, and he's all messy anyway, so it doesn't matter. And there you go, you've got Animal. There you go. Do one more. I'm going to do Brandy's favourite. I'm going to do Ralph. So with Ralph, the easiest way to do that is to kind of do this, the shape of the top of his head is kind of like that. And then he's kind of got a big, round, black nose. And there you go. And then the shape of Ralph is kind of similar to animals, but on an angle. His eyes. Something like that. And then his mouth is, it's like a separate section. So we've kind of got this thing going on. That's kind of what his mouth looks like. And he doesn't, from what I could see, appear to have an obvious tongue like most of the Muppets pointing out of the mouth. It's got this going on. And then the rest of it is to just to give him his kind of hair, and then his ears coming down, and then maybe just blend that in a bit so that it's not as obvious that it's part of that shape. And that's kind of how you do Ralph. So quite a simple one, but that's kind of the gist of it. Somebody just in the waiting room now, just let them in. Okay. Right. So there's a few different Muppets you can have a go at. I want to now just quickly talk about some of the elements at play and how you create a kind of Muppet character. So the way I kind of think about it is, if you take the Ralph example, he's kind of got a shape where he's got his head kind of like this, and then a separate kind of section under it like that. So some Muppets are like that, if you imagine them from the side. Some more like this, where they come down and then the mouth kind of stops there. And then if you can imagine somebody's kind of got their hand in there operating a Muppet, that's kind of how their anatomy works in terms of their heads. And then if I take that example again, where it's this kind of shape, then typically they've kind of got a tongue that's coming down there. And then you imagine the rest of it, you just can imagine that the kind of nose and the eyes are kind of sat on top of, like they've been stuck. Maybe some eyebrows. So they're all kind of like things that are sat on top. The ears would be kind of separate and on typically. And then if they had some hair, something like that going on. That's kind of how you imagine building up the face of a Muppet. Now, if we bring it back to the front and we look at kind of the different options you've got on the different styles when I was looking at drawing these, if we start with the eyes, you've kind of got the beaker style, just two eyes close together, kind of something like that, or you can turn that into Scooter by turning those into glasses. You can take those eyes, and quite a few characters have this. The Fozzie Bear has those kind of eyes going on. You can take the same idea and draw the bottom half of those eyes, but then exaggerate the lids. And that's more like how Gonzo's eyes are structured. So you've got a few different ways to play with their eyes there. Then obviously we've talked already about, you know, Kermit's. Miss Piggy's are kind of the other way. They're like this with the eyelashes coming out. And then Miss Piggy actually has an iris, interestingly, compared to most Muppets. And then I think we've already said you've kind of got animal, Ralph kind of options. You can play around and you can obviously do combinations of those things. And those are kind of how you can create Muppet eyes. The ears are typically at the side of the head. They'll just kind of come out and maybe have the hint of a curve behind them. But obviously you've got, you know, bear ears for Fozzie, that kind of thing. And obviously Miss Piggy has pig ears, but they're all kind of attached on and stuck on, I think is the main thing. And then with the mouths, most of them tend to be happy, smiling mouths that have this kind of shape where they curve out and down. And then the tongue tends to be at the top of the mouth, as you've said, something like that. But obviously we've already talked about kind of beakers kind of got this this shape, mouth, as we've said. We've done animals' mouth, and the other ones are maybe thinking about some of the more human-like characters sometimes have this kind of the top of the lip, kind of like that, and then the shape beneath where they're two separate sections, kind of a bit like Ralph's mouth. Noses, if I just quickly cover some of those. At the simplest level, you have a circle or a big circle, or animals, kind of teardrop shape, nose, that kind of thing. Obviously, Miss Piggy has a unique nose, but the most unique nose in the Muppets has to be this one. Gonzo's nose. And finally, things like eyebrows and other things, again, I've said, just think of them as kind of just being blocks that you're sticking on, so they can be thick ones or thinner ones or fuzzy bear style ones, lots of different styles. So you can kind of piece those together, a combination of different styles of noses, eyebrows, etc. And you can combine them to create your own character, bearing in mind that you're imagining that this kind of anatomy for a Muppet character. And then what I've done here to show you kind of what I mean in the interest of time, I did a couple on my iPad where I produced Muppet portraits, and in fact shows up okay there. So these are my two daughters who helped me design their Muppet characters, and obviously you can be fun, you can give them coloured skin and they want different colours in their hair. And I'm not sure who this chap is, he looks familiar, but I can't quite place him. Very, very clever looking chap, I think. There you go.
Definitely not me, mate.
So that is my whistle-stop tour of how to draw Muppets and the anatomy of Muppet characters. Paddy, I'll stop sharing the hand back to you and you can introduce the challenge.
Awesome. Thanks, Grant. If you could admit anyone that joins, that'd be great. So back over to you on that. When Grant said he's going to draw some Muppets as a warm-up, I didn't expect him to quite go as detailed as that. So that's amazing. You clearly spent a lot of time there, Grant, your weekend. So thank you so much, Grant. So we said we're going to give away a couple of prizes. So your homework from today, if you should choose to accept the challenge, is to draw a self-portrait using that Muppet style, and we'd love to see it. So the idea is you could either do a self-portrait or of someone you know, or even a famous person, but really just have fun with it, and you can color it in, you can do, well, pretty much whatever you'd like. And what we're going to be doing is I'll post a link in the chat now. So we've created a post on LinkedIn, and what we'd like you to do is between now and Saturday is to post your images as a comment on that post, and for the whole community to like your favorite ones that you see on there. So Grant and I, we talked about maybe judging them ourselves, and then we thought, you know something, that is just
too much pressure.
Never going to work. Yeah, we would never want to do that. We asked Brandy if she'd like to judge, and Brandy said nope. So we'd like you guys to judge each other's. And the idea is on Saturday, we will take a look, and the post or the comment that has the most likes will get a free ticket for the Visual Jam Extra that we mentioned. So we'll contact you directly through LinkedIn. Second prize for the second most popular likes will get 75% off, and 50% off for the third. So the bar is high, because I know you guys are going to do some amazing visuals. So I've just posted that link in the chat. I'll just do it once more if anyone missed it. So feel free to either bookmark that or copy and paste it somewhere safe, and then we'd love to see your portraits. And on
I think on that, Paddy, as well, just to reiterate, we talked about it, you know, this isn't about the best artist, is it? It's about having fun. So if people can, you know, draw something but put some humor in there, and I think we can all kind of encourage each other as a community.
Absolutely. So it's not about artistic talent, it's more about the creativity and just having some fun with it.
Absolutely.
So that would be awesome. And so on that note, I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to kick off the proper event. So Grant, back over to you.
Thanks, Paddy. So I mean, Brandy's already kind of introduced herself and interacted with her, but I mean, I just like to say I'm so excited that Brandy has agreed to join us. When we did our first visual jam, we put up a Miro board where we asked people to kind of put their dream guests on there, and Brandy was top of the list there. And I'm not sure I really thought that Brandy would respond and come on and join in this madness, but she has. So yeah, I won't go any further. Brandy, I'll let you introduce yourself, but just thanks ever so much for joining us and welcome to the Visual Jam.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so happy to be here. Quickly, do we want people to go to the Miro board for that question? Is that awesome?
Yeah, I'll put the link in the chat. Yeah.
Great. As a segue, we're inviting you to hop back on over to the Miro board. And we asked the question, what's your biggest challenge in organizing information visually? And so on that board, you'll see some Post-it notes. I just want to invite you to move Post-it notes into which of those areas do you find most challenging for yourself? So, yeah. And you all have Martin Hausman to thank, because it's basically, I think the second he finished his session, he messaged me and says, you gotta talk to this community and work with these gentlemen. So he definitely was a fantastic intro into
Absolutely.
you two
Shout
and
out
what
to
you're
Martin
doing
for
with
that.
this gorgeous community. Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Paddy, do you mind bringing up is it okay if you bring up the Miro board?
Yep,
Awesome.
I can share my screen for a second. Yep.
Fantastic. So we can see what are the areas folks find most challenging.
Lots of activity
Love
going
the
on.
swarm of names. Yeah, exactly.
There it is.
Beautiful. So again, we're just inviting you to pull those Post-it notes and set them in the boxes so we can get kind of a visual cue of what aspects of visual organization do you find most challenging. That is a thing of beauty.
Oh, I think, hang on, it might be layers.
Yeah.
There might be something with the layers. So I don't know if some of the Post-its are being dropped behind. So,
Yeah, I think they are.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
all right,
Yeah,
I'll
send the graphic to the back kind of thing.
yeah, let me
Got
see if
it.
I can fix that. 1 second.
There you go.
Yeah, excellent.
Oh, hang on. Sorry. We're all
You
going to
can't
move.
move it. People
It'll
put
work,
the
it'll
Post-its
work.
on there.
Hang on. It's all going to go wrong now. Hang on. Let me.
It's all right, Paddy. Nobody's watching.
Right. There we go.
Beautiful.
It's being recorded. Right.
Those wily boards moving around.
There we go. Locked it. Good.
There we go.
Should work now.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're seeing quite a bit around not knowing what structure to use, don't know where to place items on the page.
Yeah, I put those there.
Everything sort of on the same level. Yeah, excellent. How to distill text, knowing what text to write, for sure. So those are kind of the standouts. Awesome, thank you. So folks are welcome to keep moving items around there, but I'm going to hop on over to my slides and share this model with you, which I'm so darn excited to do. So I just wanted to quickly share. Can folks, yeah, I think we're good. You can see me.
Yeah.
My little face in the corner in my slide. I'm going to change my view so I can see you all. And just very quickly, this is my main camera. I can see my slides down here. And when I'm looking up, it's because I can see your beautiful faces. And I can also see the chat on the side. So if folks have questions as we go, please feel free to add them to the chat. Don't message me directly. I can't see that, but I can see the shared chat on the right over here. So I just wanted to talk about a couple Muppet connections. This all came from when we were brainstorming the agenda. What should the icebreaker question be? And I said, well, of course it should be what your favorite Muppets. What is your favorite Muppet? As if you could only choose one. But that's how we got into the land of Muppets. This is a drawing I made for my big comprehensive online course. In the lesson talking about how much you can organize information with just 2 pens by using shading and line thickness and all that kind of stuff. So this was I used the Muppets as my content. When we talk about influences and style, absolutely probably the 2 clearest inspirations in my work are the Muppets there on the left. And how many folks know La Linea, the cartoon, the Italian cartoon? Yeah, awesome. Here in the US, they were the kid-friendly ones were shown in a kind of Muppet knockoff TV show we had called The Great Space Coaster. And as soon as I saw that continuous line in that negative space little guy in those cartoons, loved it. So you can definitely see both those influences in my guy and how I draw. And I am contractually obligated to tell you I share a birthday with Ernie. So there you go. So excuse me. Today we are, I'm going to share this model called the Visual Organization Scale, or VOS, VOS. Excuse me. It was created by invitation to contribute to this anthology, The World of Visual Facilitation. And it's a build off of a simpler, shorter scale that I had in my first book, The Graphic Facilitator's Guide, called the Synthesis Spectrum. Both of them went from linear text on the left to highly synthesized visuals on the right. But in the years since publishing that book, I realized I wanted to add a little more nuance and get a lot more clear about this range of visual organization and the different steps in between. So if you are mapping this out, technically there's kind of 7 levels, but because we sneak a couple midpoints, you're going to have a total of 10 kind of steps across the drawing. So again, this is the entire model, and it's absolutely meant to help give us some context and some clarity around different visual choices and how do we organize information visually on the page, and how what are some of the pitfalls, where might we get stuck. And as I describe these steps, I want to invite you to notice which of these already come easily, which of these feel sort of out of reach and harder to do, which of them you might feel is like a place you might be kind of too reliant on or too comfortable with. So again, just notice at what steps, what levels do you find your work fitting in. So first, we're just going to start good old linear text. It is visual, it is organized, and it's organized from left to right and top to bottom. So, you know, we've all seen umpteen flip charts out in the world forever and ever, where as people are having ideation sessions or strategy sessions, the only organization really is starting at the top of the flip chart and filling up the flip chart, moving to the next flip chart. Absolutely fantastic if you are making a list. The issue, of course, is a lot of information takes a lot of other shapes. So again, good old step 1, linear list. The second, what we're adding when we move into the next step is we're adding treatment of the text. So we're changing the style of the text, the size of the text, and that's what I call 1B. And this is the embellished list. Very, very classically, Mike Rohde's original sketchnote style, where he's using a Moleskine sketchbook and still treating the text very linearly in that it's portrait pages side by side, but there's more push and variance in the size of the text. There's some lines organizing information. Very often folks have the little caricature of the speaker, but it's still pretty darn linear. You know, we're playing more with text, but we're not necessarily getting spatial yet.
We got Mike with us as well. Brandy has just joined the meeting.
Oh, perfect. Awesome.
Hey, Brandy.
Yes. Hi. I don't see you yet. Hi. Glad you're here. So again, it's more visual for sure, but it's still in that kind of portrait linear column kind of shape. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to break out of that linear shape and we're going to add spatial organization. As we move into the next step, I call it popcorn. Really, very simply, it's scattering ideas across the page. And I find in my work that even if I'm, often you can take something that could have just been step one on a flip chart, just by scattering it across the page, a couple things happen. One is you're breaking a pattern people are used to. So people take notice. They go, what's going on here? I haven't seen a flip chart look like that. And two, it does give you the opportunity to put similar ideas next to each other. And this is a great point, great opportunity to talk about. A lot of my examples today will be live work and will be live work that serves groups, because that is the biggest base of my experience. But I absolutely want you to transfer these examples to the kind of work you do. Now, what I love about group work and what I love about the live work is they have very high demands. Helping that group feel listened to, working large scale, working live and keeping up with content. So when we're working smaller scale, doing sketch notes, or we're taking more time with a non-live project, a lot of these organizational systems will absolutely apply. Just happens that having been a graphic facilitator since 1996, that's absolutely where most of my examples come from. This slide is an introductory, the opening session of one of the IFVP conferences, International Forum of Visual Practitioners. And you can see there on the left, a conversation about trends, which is pretty much a list. And I just, instead of making it a linear list, it's a cluster of popcorn. This is from a client project towards the end of the day when they're kind of very quickly wrapping up. And at the top there, you can see the series of questions, what's your gut say, so what, now what, and then closing thoughts. Popcorn. I'm using some stars and some bullets to kind of distinguish one point from another, but that was exactly the right kind of organization for that point in the agenda. And yes, Antonio, thank you for pointing out that yes, I can move around where I am in the screen, my little picture in picture. So now when we move into from popcorn, what we're adding is icons. And this is what I call picto popcorn, or folks who've known my work for a while, I also call this iconitis, when your icons are inflamed. Goofy dad joke over here. But it really is when we get into this very much like a translation issue of I've captured this content in text, and now I have to come up with a corresponding icon. Now I'm borrowing some slides from a different presentation, which is more about the skills of the visual thinker. Today, we're talking kind of what happens on the page, but here is an example that, let's say you're in that translation mode, right? And you hear the concept cold drink and you think, great, I'll draw a trapezoid with a line and it'll look like a glass with a straw in it. I hear hot drink, no problem. I'm gonna draw a cup with steaming heat lines coming off the top of it. How about a microwave? Well, okay, we'll just make a kind of rectangle with a handle and some buttons, and that works. Stovetop, well, I don't really have to draw the whole stove. Maybe I can just draw the burners. Okay, one style of burners. Then ice cream, yep, I can draw an ice cream cone. Popsicle, okay, yeah, kind of a weird shape, but that says popsicle. And then nutrition. What do I draw for nutrition? It's not a noun. It's not a person, place, or thing. I'm seeing some knowing smiles up there in the gallery. And really the issue is that often when people discover visual thinking, especially if they're coming from kind of the tyranny of the text-based world, very often they kind of get into this, okay, now images are good and words are bad, right? How many folks are kind of like, there's too much text in my drawings, you know, I don't know how to bring in icons, right? So we go into a very binary thing of words are bad, images are good, or like we just described, you're getting into a very binary translation issue of here is the word, here is the image. My main issue with picto popcorn is it takes up too much of your mental energy. And when you get something like nutrition, you stop thinking, you stop listening. Paddy wrote, words are bad for your health. I believe both words and images can live happily together. So, and you'll see through my examples, personally, I love to de-emphasize imagery and talk about all the other visual choices we have as we're making these drawings to make meaning. So, and to the point about how do you draw nutrition, you can write the word nutrition down, maybe put a box around it, and that works. And you can keep moving. So that is the biggest thing, is not losing too much of your mental energy to be present and be organizing information because you're just stuck in that role of translator. So next, as we move from Pictopopcorn into the next level, we're adding visual titles. We might be adding some containers. And here at level 3, I'm borrowing a term from Anthony Weeks. Anthony Weeks is a dear friend and colleague, lives in California. He wrote for the other anthology, Drawn Together Through Visual Practice, which I had the pleasure of editing. He used this term scattergram for a lot of what he was seeing as far as work in the world, very much in the kind of graphic recorder world, where it would be a large title, a lot of points on the page, but it looks scattered, feels scattered because there's no sort of connectors or flow. There's no sense of how to move through the drawing. So yes, and Antonio, yes, Anthony has an awesome name for sure, and he's a wonderful human. So here what we're doing, this is what I like to call, from my kind of vernacular of the idea shapers, a poster full of postage stamps. So you're really kind of looking at everything being the same size on the page. I'm seeing a couple grins. I don't know if this feels familiar to folks, but this is a very common place for folks to be working at. Way back in 2009, I was trying to, when I was working on my marketing materials as a graphic facilitator, trying to distinguish what my style looked like compared to what a lot of other folks were doing to set the right expectations with the client. And here I was trying to mimic that style with the content of the movie, The Wizard of Oz. I realize this graphic's a little fuzzy, but I think you definitely get the idea. And this is where we still, even though we might have more icons, we might make this more spatial. A lot of times we're still treating that large landscape piece of paper like a series of columns. So starting out in that upper left-hand corner, working down till you run out of page, moving over, starting at the top, running out of page. Yeah, I see and I do this. Yeah, for sure. And that, so you still have a very, very linear text-based organization to that chart. Now here is an example from a past project that was perfect for a scattergram. It was actually the right shape to do a scattergram. This was a big annual conference for a hospital system, and it was 3 days, and each morning they invited 6 to 7 employees to give a very, very short talk. So each of these talks was about 3 minutes. So in this case, I started each of those 3 days using the leftmost part of my big sheet of paper to capture these specific talks. And even though these 3 were 3 separate days, I kind of knitted them together so we could see all the speakers at once. But that was a case where it made sense to have a poster full of postage stamps because those talks were so short. So there are times these levels may be the right shape. My concern is when folks get stuck here, where that becomes kind of the only ability you have to organize is the poster full of postage stamps, or unfortunately, like I said, getting stuck in that translation issue. So let's talk about how to get past that. Here, when we move from 3 to 4, we're adding groupings and hierarchy. And Ruchi, you'll definitely see exactly what you said here. I start in the center and go around spirally. You'll see that's kind of a perfect segue, what you'll see next. Level 4, I call structured clusters. And structured clusters are a bit like a mind map, less rigid than the Tony Buzan strict definition of a mind map. I love that you can have multiple clusters on a page. This could be an example of 5 breakout groups coming back and sharing what they worked on with the whole group. And I like to call these blobs and stems. So I love using these very blobby organic shapes. They're super forgiving. And I just love that these can kind of grow in any direction. super duper forgiving. But here you are seeing levels of hierarchy in a way you aren't seeing in the previous drawings. Very much to that point about a central image. This is a communication piece my friend John Ward and I created for a half-day workshop we gave years ago. And even though this is a pretty simple kind of radial diagram, there's a really lovely range of scale. So here you can see the very center, that title, extra large, the 6 main points, large, some themes pulled out. It's sort of like the next level of information. The details underneath those 6 points, small. And just in that one case, it looks like here we've got that kind of extra small point off of that level. But here, even if you took away those 6 stars, those 6 numbers, at a glance, you could see there were 6 main points because the same choices are made within that level of information. Similarly, this is actually for the hospital system too. We had a keynote speaker talking about 5 keys of wellness. Happily, she actually talked about 5 keys of wellness. For those who know, that same event, we had somebody doing 8 pillars. He only shared 4 and then he was selling his book. So that's a case where you start out thinking this is going to be, 8 things on the page. But this was, again, very radial and little less distinct, but you can see eat food, just move, use your brain, practice mindfulness and optimism, find your passion and serve are all the same, those are the 5 keys all drawn in the same way, same size, same thickness. So now, as we move from structured clusters into the next step, so I'm so glad these examples are working for you all. Thank you, thank you. Going into the next step, we're adding greater scale and structure. So very similar, building off of what we just saw. Here we're pushing scale for text and for images. So in this drawing, I'll explain the blue part in a moment, but if you look at kind of the yellow-green part, we have kind of this giant fork, and we can have 4 points coming off the tines of the fork. You can see that there on the left and the right are 2 structured clusters. There's a grouping of information at the bottom in that box, but we're really pushing the scale of icons and the scale of text. And here is where we're adding some synthesis. So as we're capturing what's being said, we're also processing and organizing and saying, here's a pattern I'm seeing, or here's a key takeaway that I'm hearing. Or for instance, that little circle on the right could be that I'm using these examples roughly about food. Maybe it's sort of somebody talking about a balanced meal, with sort of, this is how you divide up the plate. Like that could be something that maybe wasn't explicitly said, but kind of pieced together as you listen and you're adding to the drawing. Now, I wouldn't literally make these 2 different colors. This is just to demonstrate this within this model, but that's being able to add some of those higher levels of meaning versus what you just strictly hear. Now, this is an example from a very short TED Talk. This talk is like 6 minutes or something. There's also a good example of when I'm known for synthesis. When people think synthesis, a lot of times they think lack of information because it's at that broader, kind of aerial view. This is a case of organizing. But in this drawing, we've got the 5 steps at the top. We've got a section around losing your listening, kind of what is the problem. Towards the right, you see where he's talking about time and space and how it affects how you listen. And then at the bottom is sort of the big concluding, TED Talk punctuation mark. Let's go out and do these things in the world. Now, the transition from 5 to 6 is getting to that idea of what kind of structure am I going into this drawing with? How am I looking at this drawing as a whole composition? Now, I did this work for years, graphic facilitation for years, and when I saw the columns, I didn't get it. But it took me a really long time to recognize that the reason I kind of entered the work around this space was I do happen to come from a fine art background, and I also super love composition. So it took me a really long time to kind of recognize like, oh, wait a second. I see that landscape page as a whole canvas, not something to carve up into columns. So this is something I happen to fall into this work with a lot of familiarity with. So I had that going for me. Some folks have different experiences they're coming in with that are going to shape how they organize information. So here, step 6 is integrated whole. And in this example, say I'm doing a session and it's about food most broadly, like I said, and I have a sense of where this next session is going to go. And I might go into this talk saying, all right, on this canvas, I'm going to draw a horizontal line, super duper abstract. It's just a horizontal line, but I'm going to treat that like the table. So anything that's above the page, above the line, I should say, in the top 2/3 of this drawing will be, on the right will be about the eater, and I've given myself a large figure to build off of. Anything below that horizontal line is what's on the table, the food. And then towards the left there, I've got this great open space to talk about the experience of eating. So that's an example of going into a talk with what I like to call scaffolding. Now, it's not as specific as a template. I'm not kind of pushing myself into fitting information into little sections. It's this kind of scaffolding that different things can hang off of. So I use my kind of everyman character tons and tons and tons because there's a lot of different things I can hang off of those human figures. Now you'll see the wizard, the man behind the curtain in the Wizard of Oz in a moment here. But now this is something that is very, very, is a big signifier of my own personal style. And I debated when I wrote the Idea Shaper book, do I include it? Like, am I giving away like the secret sauce? And I'm like, no, it's important. It's a really useful tool. So these are a couple drawings from the book where I say, you know, A through U, here's different things that might be added to the figure. Now, in a particular piece of content, I don't know if it's going to be J and G and K, or if it's going to be, you know, whatever, you know. But again, I've given myself this scaffolding or this structure to build off of. Grant, I'm glad you like the scaffolding idea. Yeah, again, we're just thinking about something open enough that we can hang things off of it, but it's not restricting our thinking because we don't know where our own thinking or the group's conversation is going to go. So here's an example from another IFVP conference where I was working with Holger Scholz. And we went into this knowing we had a whole conversation where I knew what he wanted to present and what model he wanted to present. And why is my face so funny? I'm just listening very intently. That is the face of the graphic facilitator. We went into this knowing that he was going to talk about this very large cycle and that cycle would repeat. So I knew that going in that was the kind of shape I was going to make. That's what you can do when you have a more collaborative relationship with the facilitator or the clients you're working with, and you can talk through the agenda. I wouldn't necessarily be able to come up with this if we hadn't had, you know, that explicit conversation. So you saw this example earlier. This was my kind of Brandy version of the Wizard of Oz, and it's a movie. It's narrative. The structure really, in this case, is a big old loop or oval. So yes, and Grant said, so having a bit of info in advance helps you pick that main image or scaffolding for sure. And a lot of it does come from experience, you know, what you learn from one project and what you might try on the next one. You know, you're always building that visual vocabulary from your penmanship to your color palettes to the way you might use a human structure, that kind of stuff. And in this case, you know, really the shape of it's a giant oval. It loops back to home at the beginning. And thank you, Gabriella, for pointing that out. The black fill, those solid black shapes, absolutely help you understand and see the content more clearly. You know, if you imagine that all those black shapes being gone, you'd really be sorting out the content from the paper a lot more. But that's another way we can kind of visually make it look more integrated. That's kind of a side-by-side. So one of the absolute easiest kind of hacks for making an image look more integrated is limiting your color palette. I know Martin Hausman and all the beautiful Vocablo trainers, they teach a limited color palette that happens to be different choices than the limited color palette that I teach, but both of them are about using color a lot versus using a lot of colors so that you know how you're going into a drawing using color it takes up less mental bandwidth. You know what the function of each color is, but it's also creating a more cohesive image because you're not using, everything in your kit. So yeah, Lisa says I use the client's brand colors, so limit happens automatically. Yeah, I'm always taking cues from, is it an organization's brand? Is it the event's brand? Is there content? Is there a model or content I'm building my color palette off of? Do I need to know that client's competitor? Is that part of the conversation? So, all those things absolutely can help inform that palette. And then finally, you already saw the sneak peek for this, but that final step is that newer, higher levels of meaning. So here we're getting into something that is more of a higher level visual synthesis. Now, when I talked about this in the Graphic Facilitator's Guide, and it was fewer steps and it was very specific to graphic facilitation, I made the distinction that making this kind of graphic, there's certain uses for this kind of higher level summary graphic. Now, if I was in an event and I was drawing a level 7 drawing in front of that group of participants, they may not feel like their experience was captured. They may not feel heard because there's too much separation between them feeling listened to and creating that shared understanding and helping them really see and touch the details of their work. Because if I was doing this live, I'm pushing it too far into synthesis. But this kind of graphic is perfect if we're taking what happened in the room and sharing it with a wider audience, right? Does that make sense? Because if you were trying to share the drawings done live with a wider audience, folks haven't experienced that drawing. It has very different meaning to them. And Johan said, from process to product, yes, you're making different visual choices. I believe when I'm hired as a graphic facilitator, 80% of what I'm doing is making this drawing live in front of the group to facilitate their process. And something more like this communication piece is more product focused because it is sort of that communication tool. So, and this is an example. Sam Brad invited me to do a reflection, at the end of 2016. So that's an example of higher level of information kind of integrated in a visual, a more synthesized drawing. So I'm hoping that here you see different spots where your work may already fit, where you might want to push yourself more and get more agility across this spectrum. We're going to go into breakouts and you're going to talk about what is a key takeaway or questions you might have about this, where you see your strengths in your work. But sort of in closing here, I want to talk about this idea that when I think about visual thinking, it's so much broader than specifically being a graphic facilitator, though that's been a lovely career for me for a very long time. Really, the overarching idea here is that when you're making a drawing, you're making countless choices on the page. And with each of those choices you're making, what is the text I'm pulling out? How am I distilling it? What color is it? What size is it? Where is it placed on the page, especially in relationship to other ideas? In each of those choices, you're making meaning for yourself. And I really love visual thinking because it works beautifully as both a tool for reflection, sort of helping you realize, like, what the heck did we just experience? What did I just go through? And also a great tool to create a plan of action. And my favorite thing is when making a drawing is the first step in making great things happen. Now, the tricky part is that part at the bottom. What are those choices? That might feel really complex or really overwhelming. And definitely why I'm here, what I do is to break down that complexity into learnable pieces. So this book, you saw a couple drawings from it earlier, The Idea Shapers is about breaking down visual thinking into super specific techniques and concepts called the Idea Shapers. There's 24 total in the book. And my job was to break down each one so that they were so simple, you kind of went, well, duh, like, okay, I can do that. But you're building them back up and doing more and more sophisticated drawing. This isn't all 24, but these are how most of those 24 map across this model. so you can see there's a through line in everything I do. I definitely want to send out, give you 3 invitations. One is I'm happy to share the chapter from the anthology where you'll see this model and another way that I've explained it. You'll see a lot of overlap today. Second, if folks want to hear the parallel presentation about the skills, Monday, I'm more than happy to share with you the visual thinker success path. So you're going to see how these two kind of are in parallel and interweave, but how to help you get more of that sense of mastery over your visual thinking practice. And then I do want to let you know that I have a workshop on, oh, move my picture. Thank you. I appreciate that. So again, we see free chapter. Here we've got a next Monday. If you'd like to join me, same time we started today, Visual Thinker Success Path. And I do have a one-day workshop coming up on May 7th. And definitely that workshop is absolutely designed to help you break through this chunk. I borrowed Harry there. Let's explode those blockages. And really very quickly, this workshop, The Vitals of Visual Thinking, is how do you build more levels of information in your drawings? So how to create more hierarchy. How do you create more depth in your drawings with more layers? And then looking at your longevity of your practice, creating that lifelong skill. So in a one-day workshop, I'm kind of giving you, as much as I can in a day. It's kind of what can get you kind of the farthest, the fastest, and those are the idea shapers that we'll be talking about that day. And I do have a $100 gift certificate to those of you who are here when you sign up for the Visual Jam mailing list. So I think Paddy's got 2 links. One link is for the PDF and my Monday session, and one link is to sign up with them to get that special code, and that is me. So, there we go. And now I will breathe.
And stuff. Thanks, Brandy. That was brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Really good.
And do we have time for breakouts? Is that okay?
Yeah, I think we do. We've got just over 20 minutes left, so I think
Perfect.
we can do kind of about 15 minutes to do the kind of reflection and breakout part.
I'm wondering, so we have, sorry, let me turn off this guy. We don't need 2 of me. One's enough. So we've got the breakouts, and we also have the mural board. Maybe we want to do the mural board and do Q&A instead of trying to do both. How does that sound?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Sounds
We're
good.
getting thumbs up. So what we did was made a mural board. I think it's going to be the same link. It's just going to be to the right of what we were doing.
That's right.
Yeah. So if you have that open, you can scroll over to the right. What we did was add, you'll see the scale and you'll see a whole bunch of Post-it notes. And the invitation is to think about what is different types of content or different types of events or different parts within an event that may take that particular shape. So we just invite you to add to that chart. So the idea is that I think a lot of times when you see that scale, the scale is horizontal. The scale does not go up, but there's kind of this feeling of everything's always better on the right, right? I'm always sort of striving to go farther and farther. Certainly the folks who want to work with me because I love synthesis and that's my strength, that's why folks come to me. But it really is about having more ability and agility across the whole spectrum. And there are times those different levels are appropriate. So Johan, what you want to do is go back to that mural link and you'll see the scale and a heck of a lot of color-coded Post-it notes. And all you want to do is type into a Post-it note in the kind of right area of the model, some kind of scenario where you might use that level of organization. So I'm going to invite you to do that. And of course, as I've been talking very, very fast, please add comments and questions to the chat. I would love to answer questions.
And Brandy, there was a question
Yes.
earlier. Somebody was requesting whether we'd be sending or sharing the slides. Is that something we can do or not?
Nope, we're not doing slides, but you can watch the replay because we're doing replay, correct?
Yeah, that's being recorded. So yeah, that will be sent out as well.
Awesome. I went fuzzy there for a sec. Yeah. Yeah, I don't share slides, but everyone's always welcome to watch the video again. And then you also have the PDF with the model in it.
Cool.
And I totally understand the folks who had to hop off. I totally understand. Thank you for your thanks and goodbyes.
Shall I share my screen, Brandy, so we can see what
Please.
people are...
I was just thinking that I'm just kind of looking at some of them. So we've got people making a to-do list at the first end of the scale, using popcorn for brainstorming,
For sure.
picto popcorn. We've got interviews with a few speakers, icebreakers, sharing singular opinions, process maps. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's some down the bottom
Great.
there as well.
Oh, yeah,
for sure.
sorry.
Moderated panel discussion, decisions, and the popcorn. What have we
I
got
have
further across?
I have a little more familiarity with mural instead of muro, so I'm feeling kind of awkward looking at the screen. So I appreciate it, looking at my own board. So I appreciate the navigation, Patty. Thank you.
That's okay.
Heather, it's going to be the same link in the chat earlier for same link, mural link. What questions do you have or comments do you have? What did that bring up? Were there any ahas? Were there any clarifying questions? Was it just so much at once? Everyone is dumbfounded and silent. Lisa has a question. Do we want to hop over Lisa, or Lisa, do you want to add it to the chat first at least? So since we got.
Oh, feel free to unmute yourself, Lisa, and just jump in.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think I'm going to unmute because it's
Great.
it's great when you can. Hi, Brandy. It's great when you have you know, when you know what people are going to be talking about ahead of time, and sometimes they'll even send the slides or an outline. But often I get called to do graphic recording at an event where there's multiple speakers or a panel or Q&A, and you know, people are saying all kinds of different things, and I usually do a doodle of each person and then try to cluster the things they've said around their face. But sometimes they'll be talking about something, they'll all be talking about a certain topic. And so I wonder, oh, gee, should I have done it around the topic and not around the person who said it? So, and I don't know what they're going to say ahead of time. So do you have any advice? I mean, of course, digitally, you could change your mind halfway through and move things around, but it's not ideal. So what would you do in that situation?
Happy to share my opinions about this. Generally, my experience with panels specifically is often they're terrible because they are a point in the agenda where they need to get certain people on stage. Like it's very political. It's like, okay, well, let's make these 5 people, you know, front and center. Very often, if there's an hour, they spend at least 30 minutes introducing themselves. So there's like no there. I don't know how many people have been in the seat in the audience watching that. So when I do a panel, I'm not I don't really do caricatures. That's just a thing with my particular style. I know some people like to do that. Even if you did kind of have a representation for each of the panelists, personally, I'm always mapping to the content, not the speaker, because we do end up getting too much of our mental energy caught up in, oh wait, who said that? Or am I putting it the right place? And if somebody's dominating the conversation or somebody's quiet, it's really obvious. Right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like some people will talk. I have to look for something for that person to say so that it won't look like they just sat there like a bump on the wall.
Right. So I had a project for the Kennedy Center, this awesome arts organization in DC here. And it was like the super sexy, it's going to be this day about what does it mean to be a citizen artist? All these artists are being invited. Yo-Yo Ma and Renee Fleming were the hosts. I mean, most of my work is not nearly this glamorous. It all sounds so awesome. And then my client said, and it's going to be 3 panels. I'm like, oh crap. Happily, it was somebody I was, you know, I'm good for advocating what I think is going to work anyway, but it's somebody I'd worked with. And I said, you know, what I just described, like panels can go really wrong. And what I'd like to do, instead of making a drawing per panel, what I'd like to do is create one drawing that really is about all these themes around being a citizen artist. And the client on the phone was like, we're jumping up and down over here. That sounds great. So that was, you know, not necessarily thinking, well, a panel has to look like this. Instead, thinking about what would be a better shape to represent this day. Then, and it turned out
adds a lot more value. That adds a lot more value than just capturing a bunch of
exactly.
quotes.
Yeah,
and it's not basically, you know, made meaning around what they said, not just they take, not just take a dictation, you know.
For sure. And what often happens with any content is a whole lot of it happens up front. And then as a conversation goes on or a presentation goes on, a lot of things are repeated. So, you know, you don't necessarily have all your information, all the content evenly spread out. And it did turn out that that first panel were the artists themselves, probably the most incredible panel I've ever seen in my life. Like they were talking to each other. It was fantastic. That was probably ended up being 60% of the drawing. And then the middle one was decent. And then the third panel of the day were the talking heads who literally showed up at like 3 p.m., sat in a chair and talked to themselves. So it was a good bet in the fact that over the course of that day, you know, I absolutely got the most rich conversation and had plenty of space for it. And then I could kind of add in the second and third panel into the drawings. But that was, you know, kind of going into it thinking, I'm going to advocate for what I think is going to work. Here's the shape I think it's going to take. I did have 2 figures. One was the artist, and I knew at some point there was going to be a second figure. I didn't know if that was going to be an institution or a community member, but I went into it knowing that, okay, there's going to be some person that this artist is interacting with. And if folks want to see, maybe I'll add a link to that visual jam page. There's just a time lapse that they did, so you can see a little bit of what that looked like. So
Appreciate it. Thank you.
yeah, good question, Lisa. Thank you. Am I missing other questions?
So we've opened up the reflection board as well, Paddy, Brandy even, so that we can get people to comment on there. So I think we spoke and we said we'd like to see any key takeaways that people have got, any changes they want to make as a result of what they've seen, or any general questions they might want to ask you, either drop them in the chat or on that board there. So we've opened that up as well.
And certainly for Monday's session, I mean, I welcome questions there too, especially if something kind of percolates between now and then. I would absolutely love to see you on Monday. Vincent asked, do I draw digitally? I always start with paper and pen. I haven't met a stylist that's fast enough or nuanced enough for me, but I'm also very, very tactile. That's my love is right now I'm standing in front of a physical piece of paper. Now I love technology wise that this isn't going to look like anything, but I have a camera above me that, you know, takes a really lovely shot of this currently blank piece of paper. So I'm not anti-technology, but for me, it's the fact that I'm a physical human in 3 dimensions standing in front of a giant piece of paper is exactly where it's at. That could be a longer, a longer answer, but there are times I draw something, scan it in, and then vectorize it, but it always starts out with paper and pen. So yeah, the iPad's very slippery. It's so hard to get that. I know there's things you can put on the screens and stuff. So awesome. Mike says, I love you're guiding the client towards something you knew suited you and would be more successful rather than accepting their idea. You are the expert. You are the one who more than anyone understands the use of visual tools for that event. So, you know, I'm always talking about advocating for yourself, you know, I don't know if I fell into this work young enough that I was too ballsy or I don't know what, but like, I've always felt like it's our job to advocate for what we're doing. You know, we're going to know it better than anything. So I'm always encouraging folks to advocate for themselves so that they can make the best use of what they're doing. That's how they're going to best serve their client. And it's a conversation. So a client may have a suggestion. And if you're like, ooh, I'm a little worried about that, or, you know, what if we tried this? It's a conversation. So, but Mike, I'm glad you pointed that or reinforced that idea.
And Brandy, I might have mixed up the dates in terms of what's coming up. So you've got the Vitals of Visual Thinking workshop, and I had that as May the 7th. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And then you've got Drawing as a Verb, May the 11th.
Oh, yes. So so the next thing is Monday, if you want to join me for the Visual Thinker Success Path. And again, you're going to see some similar images and patterns that we saw today, but it really is about building your skills as a visual thinker. The workshop that gets you the farthest, the fastest in a one-day virtual workshop is May 7th. And every month, usually the second Tuesday, I have a free Q&A session called Drawing as a Verb. So yesterday we had one, and the next one will be on May 11th. So that's the clarifying of the things.
And if people want to join that session, there's.
I'll add it. I'll
Yeah,
just add the link to the Visual Jam page, to
cool.
my link. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so what did I say I was going to add? I was going to add that. Oh, the Kennedy Center time lapse.
Yes.
Awesome. So I'll share the link in the chat, and then what Brandy's going to do is add that event to that page. So
Exactly.
you'll get that event.
Yep. And Cecile asked, do you have enough time at the end of the sessions to have a conversation with the audience about your drawing? Personally, I find it really, really hard to stop and verbalize what I've just done. I always think it's like already there on the page. So, you know, there's times where we build in more kind of interaction and iteration of the drawing, but as far as kind of giving the tour, that's one of those things where I'm always like, well, it's right there. What do you want me to say? But I love that. I just had a project last week. I haven't acted because I'm teaching so much. I'm not actively doing virtual graphic facilitation, but in that particular project, it was about graphic medicine. I was creating a drawing right behind me. And there was a point where we talked about the process of making the drawing, and it was very much about process over product, which Johan mentioned, and I'm a big fan of talking about. And but that was lovely because it was a group of people, comic book artists, different tech folks creating more visual apps around medicine and healthcare. So that was a case where it made a lot of sense to have this one speaking instead of just speaking through the pen. So you are all very welcome. I so appreciate. Oh, I got it. Cecile says that they talked to you about what they understood. Yeah, that's a great reason for having that conversation for sure. Awesome.
Brandy, I've got a question.
Yes, please.
One of the biggest challenges I have, I think it's more about selecting what to capture and what to let go. And then sometimes I find I make a decision to capture something, and it's almost like I've started, so I'm going to finish, even though I know it's not a major point, because I've got to make my visual look good, and then I lose my track sometimes. So how do you know kind of where to focus, or what kind of tips have you got for that?
Good question. I think I definitely take a lot of cues from, I mean, if I'm thinking graphic facilitation, like I'm supporting a group, in that scenario, I'm taking a lot of cues from the prep call and talking to the client about the agenda. So I understand what each part of the agenda is aiming to do. And sometimes, you know, I'll ask a client, I'm like, okay, if they start talking about other things, do you want me to capture it? Or do you want me to be more selective and stay more strictly to what our objective is? You know, that can be a good question, kind of gauge. Okay, if it's going to go this direction, do you want me to follow it? Or do you want me to stay here? I think if you have something where you think, oh, not sure that's so central, just the biggest thing is just don't let it derail you. You know, you can just say, you know what, it's going to sit there. I'm going to put some other things on the page. If it's really bugging you, you could cover it up. You know, I use mailing labels on my giant sheet. So I just, you know, kind of erase with covering something up with stickers. But if it's your own personal work and you realize, oh, that isn't quite on topic, you know, you could cover it up, you could redraw it, you know, so there's always iteration. I think we put a whole lot of pressure on ourselves to get everything, like the pressures we put on ourselves are immense. One is we treat ourselves like a recording device instead of a human. And often when you do that, all you're doing is capturing. That's how we get those scattergrams. There might be a ton of content there, but we're not stepping back and listening for the connections.
So you don't get
creating
that
that flow. Exactly. This is like the folks who, I don't know how many folks were really, what am I trying to say? When you were a kid in school and you took notes and you took like notebooks full of notes, but you don't actually remember being in class, you know, because you weren't listening as a learner, you were listening as a recording device. So part of it is, you know, treating yourself as a glorious human with this beautiful brain, right? And stepping back and listening. The second is the pressure we put on ourselves to have these beautifully organized drawings, when a lot of times, especially live in events with clients, those are messy conversations. Those are lopsided conversations. You know, that example of those clusters, you know, one of the clusters only had one point coming off of it. Instead of thinking like they all have to be even, right? This I talk about, generally people tend to be, I call it, you're a messy mel, where it's okay if things are messy and lopsided and uneven. or you're more of a tidy tilde, where you're trying to kind of make sure there's 5 points, or I just did 4 points for each topic or whatever. But that's not the shape a conversation takes,
No.
especially when we're working with the kind of fuzzy front end of projects that are messy and weird, right? So giving yourself that space to be more loose. If for some reason you need to redraw something so it is more of that polished communication piece, then you're taking that process focused drawing and refining it into more of a product that has other needs. But, you know, again, giving ourselves that space to let it be messy, let it reflect what's going on, that everything isn't even, because that's not the way the world works. So, and that lopsidedness in itself is information. That messiness is information. Yeah. Was any of that useful, Grant?
No, it was. I think it's, I can see in a graphic facilitation context, because you've kind of got that opportunity to channel and filter, and like you said, have a pre-conversation about where you want to take it. I think it's maybe more where you just kind of graphic recording or sketchnoting where you don't know what's coming. I think Lisa said in the chat, sometimes a speaker's talking and there's a whole preamble, but that is just to get to the meat, and you've taken half of your space.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that example specifically. A couple things came to mind. One is, am I going to remember the first one? Second one is when, like, for instance, that 5 ways to listen better. When I use that to teach, very often, you know, you see the title 5 ways to listen better, and folks will just sit back and wait until the speaker says number 1. When it turns out he shared all sorts of great context setting before he got there. So that's one of those ways where we're like, okay, I think I know what this is, instead of actually being present. And I just thought of the first one. First thing is, you know, even if I'm having a prep conversation with a client, that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen during the day at all, right? And I know some folks really love having a whole lot of preparation. They want to see the slide decks. They want to get that info. If that's what you need to feel comfortable, fantastic. I personally don't want that stuff. I want my conversation to set context and know objectives and walk through the agenda. But then I don't, that's the time I need to spend. And I just want to be well rested and show up and be present, because I know how much can change in the day between the prep meeting and the event. So there's a lot of times where I'm taking cues from that conversation, but in all ways, I'm very, very much holding it lightly.
Yeah.
Because if we try to hold on to those preconceived ideas and we stop being present, whether it's sketchnoting individually, whether it's working with a group, you know, it really is about being present to what exactly is happening for you, whether it's outside content or figuring out your own stuff internally.
I'm conscious, Brandy, we know you've got to go at past, so
Yep.
I think we'll wrap the questions there. Paddy, Brandy, thank you ever so much. Some great comments. For sure. I really enjoyed it. Awesome stuff.
I did too.
Yeah, could we maybe show our hands, do some jazz hands for
oh, please.
Brandy? So thank you so much, Brandy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I think.
Did you want to get a screenshot of jazz hands, Paddy?
Oh yeah, let me get my apps.
For those of us who are able to.
Gotta get the Muppets
in there.
This.
Oh, I love seeing your faces and your jazz hands. Ah, yay! Muppet flail.
The Muppets are sort of just attacking you.
Grant is overrun with Muppets. That's awesome.
I'll post that.
Thank you all.
Awesome.
Thank you all. And like I said, if you can join me Monday, I'd love to continue the conversation. And yeah, so thankful for your time. And the reason I need to run is I'm getting my first vaccine shot. Woohoo!
Good stuff. Thanks,
so yay
Brandy.
for that.